Hi there, everybody. Mr. Hall of Fame recently did a video where he was showing the albums, the top albums of influence in his life, his musical life at least, and there have been a number of follow-up videos by other YouTubers. They're all really interesting. Great thread, great theme. And I'm going to show you a series of albums. I'm not going to restrict it to 5. I mean, I was raised in the 60s where you broke the rules, and so I'm going to break the rules here and just show what I have for albums that were really influential to me when I was buying records in the 60s and early 70s. I'm going to stop it in the early 70s. The first album I will show you here is first pop or rock album that I ever had. And my dad used to work in the States a lot, traveling from Canada into the States, and he brought this back for me when I was a kid. It is Chubby Checker, Let's Twist Again. And I had my little record player and I used to just play this album to death. And this is the original album. Most of these albums are the original albums that I bought. I have replaced a couple of them with newer versions because I really did wear out the grooves on some of these. But this is the original one from 1962 or something like that. Chubby Checker, Let's Twist Again on Parkway label. I love the checkerboard. I used to sit there and just stare at the checkerboard. It was great. Parkway label. Next one I'm going to show you is the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night. Now my first Beatles album was the Canadian Beatlemania album that I received in 1964, probably about a week after there on Ed Sullivan, which was great. And this was the summer of 1964, and the movie was a hoot. It was fantastic. Although going to the movie theater, you couldn't hear much of what they were saying on the screen, what the Beatles are saying, because they were speaking in that very quick Liverpudlian accent, and the girls were screaming in the movie theater, which was a laugh. But the music was wonderful. I played this album to death. Even the George Martin tracks, the instrumental tracks, I used to love them. And just a wonderful album. I think it's their best album. I prefer this early stuff to the later stuff. This is the first album where they wrote all their own songs. So, a Beatles, Hard Day's Night. This is the British copy. It doesn't have the George Martin instrumental stuff on it. It has double the number of songs. Just want to show that to you. This is the Byrds' Greatest Hits that I bought probably 1967 or so, I would think. I love the Byrds, the early stuff. It's fantastic. The Association's Greatest Hits. Now, the Association were a terribly underrated band. Every song on this album is fantastic. I used to play this over and over again. It's on my iPod now, even still. And just a great album. After 2 West Coast bands, we're going to have the greatest band, other than the Four Seasons, I guess, ever to come out of New York City. The Young Rascals. This is Timepiece, the Young Rascals' Greatest Hits. I bought this in 1968, I think it was. Every song on this is a hit, and I mean, a lot of people like the Velvet Underground, and they talk up, bands like that. I love the Rascals. I'm a complete Anglophile as well, and 1969, I was a teenager, I had a little bit of money in my pocket, and I stepped out and double album by The Who called Tommy, and this album just turned my little head around at the time. The jacket is, I think it's just a beautiful jacket. What can you say about Pete Townsend? Best guitarist to come out of Britain in the 60s, I think. His acoustic playing on this album is just marvelous. Songwriting. The only time it lets down is probably on side 4 with a song like Sally Simpson or something. But great album. They're my band. Crosby, Stills and Nash, first album. Graham Nash had just come out of the Hollies, and Crosby out of the Byrds. Steve Stills out of Buffalo Springfield. This album, when I heard Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, which is a tribute to Judy Collins, written by Steve Stills. Marrakesh Express, 49 Bye-Byes. I mean, there's Wooden Ships. It's just a fantastic album, and it's another record that that I just listened to over and over again, and just wonderful. Creedence Clearwater Revival. Mike in Rhode Island. I'm sure you'll approve of this one. Creedence were also one of my great favorite bands back in the late 60s and early 70s, and I bought this one probably the week it was released, I think. It's a really solid album. I know that Cosmos Factory was a more popular album and had more hits, but I just loved this, the whole jug band kind of attitude they had, and the reprisal of the rock and roll songs. It was, John Fogerty was, was a genius. 1970, go to the movie theater and saw a movie called Woodstock. Yeah, it was wonderful, and totally influenced me. Huge influence. The Woodstock soundtrack, triple album set. You get Jimi Hendrix at his finest, Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Sly and the Family Stone. Wow. The Who, 10 years after. I mean, fantastic. I remember when I brought this home in the summer of 1970, and I didn't want my parents to see nude people swimming on the back for some reason. I thought they might take it away from me. But there's another great album. Grand Funk. Grand Funk, the live album. It was priced just a little bit higher than a single album, so it was an easy one to buy. And oh, I was such a Grand Funk fan. I mean, I liked bands like Cream and Zeppelin and stuff, but Grand Funk were just a great band, and I saw them live in 1971, and this is this album's not great sounding, but boy, could they ever perform. They were just wonderful. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and this is the first album. Keith Emerson had come out of a band called The Nice, who had a few minor hits perhaps in Britain. They were a prog band, of course. And Greg Lake had come out of King Crimson. And Carl Palmer, I think it was from Arthur Brown or Atomic Rooster or something. And this album, when I heard it, it was, in a way, it was my big introduction to kind of prog kind of stuff. I was also contemplating the first, or not the first, but the Yes album. It's a wonderful album as well. I'm a huge Yes fan. But this kind of expanded my mind considerably. It's a great album. It has Lucky Man on it. I did see them in concert in 1971 in Toronto. Wonderful, great show. Just a great show. This one might be a bit different. A bit surprising. Todd Rundgren, Something Anything. Todd's a genius. This might be his best album. 3 sides of it are studio recordings, and I think he wrote every song himself, produced it, played almost every instrument in the first 3 sides, and it has such variety to it. The 4th side is a great live side, lots of really funny songs and wonderful stuff. And the liner sheets and the lyric notes and stuff, he was really writing for a teenage audience at the time, and it's a really important album in my life. I was looking for this album in Toronto. I was probably, I don't know, 17 or 18 or something, and couldn't find it anywhere. I drove to Buffalo, New York, just to find this album. I went to Buffalo and I didn't find one in a department store somewhere. It was worth the trip. This has always been a favorite of mine. This one might be a little bit surprising too. There used to be a discount store in the town I lived in, outside of Toronto, and the store had a record section. They sold deletes and overruns and stuff, and I think it was about 72. This is Carl and the Passions, So Tough, which is really the Beach Boys, effectively, and it's a double album. Now, there was a song they were playing on the radio called Marcella, which was a return, almost a return to surf music for the Beach Boys. I mean, people had dismissed them by the early 70s as just being, a surf band, basically, and which was a shame, because they were still putting out really good records, but I wanted that song Marcella, and I saw this album that has Marcella on it. They also threw in another album called a 2-album set. The second album was called Pet Sounds. And, you know, I looked in the liner notes and it had a few songs I knew, like Sloop John B. You know, those were hits. It also said on it, recorded in mono, the way that Brian mixed it, or whatever. And I put Pet Sounds on, not really expecting a whole lot. And I played it, and it was wonderful. It was just great. And I turned it over, I played it again, and I played it again, and I played it again, and I've been playing it ever since. And it is the best pop album, in my mind, that's ever been recorded. Best songwriting. The musicianship, it was, you know, the finest LA studio musicians. We were some of the finest musicians in the world at the time. The Beach Boys really didn't play their instruments on their albums much back then. And, you know, I highly recommend. This is a bargain, you know, to get Pet Sounds on vinyl. The Carl and the Passions part isn't so great. Marcella's a good song, but you gotta have Pet Sounds. And Pet Sounds has been re-released in the CD box set. Do a little plug for this one. If you like the Beach Boys, you have to have this. This is a marvelous box set. Now, Motown. Huge fan of Motown. About 1971 or 72, I was in a record store, and this is like a TV advertised record. It's a 4-album set with 64 Motown original hits. And Motown were really kind of a singles. They were a singles company. It was all those great singles by the Temptations and the Four Tops, the Supremes, you know, just the fantastic Mary Wells. I mean, the list is endless. And 64 of the top hits were on this 4-album set. This is the way you want to have the 60s Motown stuff, is in a great collection like this. You know, later on Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye did some amazing albums, but in the 70s, but the 60s stuff, this is just a great collection. I mean, I like a lot of other R&B stuff from the 60s, soul stuff, but it's largely a singles thing for me rather than an LP thing. This is a good one. And the last one I'm going to show you is an album that came out originally around 1972 or 73 in the States, but it was reissued in Canada in 1976 on the Sire label, and it's the Nuggets collection. Double album. This is garage band, punk music, one-hit wonder stuff, American stuff from the 1960s, and it has just a tremendous collection of great one-off songs like Amboy Duke's Journey to the Center of the Mind, and things like that. And I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night, the Electric Prunes. So I know it's a bit out of the sphere of the earlier 60s stuff. Great compilation. Was it Stanley Mouse drawing on the cover here? This is an essential album to have. It has been superseded by a couple box sets. The first is the Nuggets 4-album Rhino set. It's pretty essential stuff. And there's also been a British version called Nuggets 2, which is 4 CDs of great British one-hit wonder, one-off stuff. So thank you for watching this. See you later.